In today's video, we are going to talk about inhibition, which in most cases is probably a more appropriate exercise for any of you who are dealing with spasticity. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset in the context of neurologic injury, with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take ownership of your rehab and your health, to live an overall more active, more mobile, pain-free, happier, healthier life. Okay, so before we can talk about why I think inhibition type activities are the most appropriate exercises for any of you that are dealing with spasticity, let's just first talk about spasticity. Spasticity, as most of you know who've been around here for a while, is an involuntary contraction of a muscle due to damage to your brain or your spinal cord. So yes, spasticity is a symptom that someone has damage to the brain or the spinal cord. There's a lot of different theories on what causes this, but the most important thing to know is it is an involuntary contraction, meaning you are not doing it on purpose. It is happening outside of your control, which can be super frustrating for a lot of you. Now, let's talk about what muscles typically become the most spastic after a stroke or a brain injury. One are the muscles that bend the elbow. The other one are the muscles that bend the wrist, and the muscles that clasp the hand and bring the thumb in. So if you are someone that has spasticity, that probably makes sense. So when you're trying to move your muscles in your arm, or you're trying to make your arm move, it will pull up, the wrist will flex, and the hand will close. Today I want to talk to you guys about two products that are a match made in heaven. Talked to you guys recently about the Camelback products and how much I love them, especially the coffee mug with the leak-proof lid. And I also mentioned in that video that I like it because I use it for mixing my powders, because you can shake it without it leaking. And that pairs perfectly with another product that I started using recently, and that is Beam Super Green products. Not only does it have a really cool name, Beam standing for Be Amazing, which I absolutely love. In addition to that, it's probably the best tasting green powder on the market. Chocolate is my favorite flavor. Now, most of you know I talk a lot on this channel that I don't think supplements are like a first line of defense when it comes to brain and body health and performance. I think the absolute foundation to optimizing brain health and body is eliminating ultra-processed foods and eating a diet filled with whole foods. But in today's food environment, it still can be challenging to get all the nutrients necessary, and that is where Beam Super Green powder comes into play. 1 scoop of Beam Super Green powder is packed with 35 fruits and vegetables, giving you the nutrients and energy to be amazing. So if you are interested in optimizing your brain and your body performance, and you want to make sure you're getting all the vitamins and minerals essential for that to happen, and you want to support this channel, click on the link in the description below. Before we dive into the exercises that are going to be the most appropriate for you, let's talk about things that can potentially make spasticity worse. Pain can make spasticity worse. Infections can increase the amount of that involuntary contraction. Overstimulation, so that could be anything from sounds, lights, crowds of people around you, anything like that that is overstimulating in the environment has the potential to make those involuntary contractions a little bit stronger. Mental stress or anxiety, think about it, anything that like kind of gets your heart racing, that can also kind of increase the excitability of just your neurologic system in general. And yes, that too can sometimes make those involuntary contractions a little bit stronger. And this is the one that's pretty important when it comes to choosing the best exercises, the perception of a challenge or a stress, whether that be a physical load that you're trying to lift, or climbing up a hill or a mountain, or stepping up onto a curb, or trying to pull your leg into the car once you've sat down in the seat, anything like that. has the potential to make that spasticity a little bit worse. Now, this is also complicated by another kind of condition that can occur after a stroke or a brain injury, and that is abnormal synergy patterns. In other words, abnormal linking up of muscle groups, meaning that when you try and move one joint, multiple joints move at the same time. We have an extensor synergy pattern and a flexor synergy pattern, primarily after a stroke or a brain injury. A flexor synergy pattern in the arm is elbow flexion with wrist flexion. In the leg, it's knee flexion with hip flexion. So when you're trying to bring that knee up towards your chest, the foot will flex up, the knee will flex, and the hip will flex all at the same time. That's a flexor synergy pattern. An extensor synergy pattern primarily is when you try and extend your hip, your knee wants to go straight and your foot wants to point. Those all happen at the same time. Now, why is that important? Is typically people have a combination of both. You have some muscles that are spastic or overactive combined with some sort of an abnormal synergy pattern. So, for example, when you try and stand on your leg, you want your knee to stay straight, but your foot points. That foot pointing down is most likely a combination of an extensor synergy pattern, meaning when the knee straightens out, the foot also wants to point, but also spasticity is very, very common in the muscles that point the foot down. That's one example. Another example, now this does also occur in the arm, but I think that what I see clinically, the most common reason for the abnormal movements in the arm is probably more because of a spastic muscle than it is because of like an abnormal synergy pattern. But that's just my experience. So we're really going to just focus on the spasticity component in the arm when it comes to choosing the best inhibition exercises. But now let's talk about that. Let's talk about inhibition a little bit. So inhibition, the reason I say that that's probably more important than activation, trying to get a muscle to move, is because if you cannot relax the bicep, you cannot straighten the arm out. So if the bicep is here and your triceps aren't very active yet, it's got to not only overcome the weight of your arm, but it also has to overcome this very, very strong bicep on the opposite side of the arm. Same with the wrist. If you want to lift your wrist up, not only do you, and your extensors are weak, your wrist extensors are weak, not only are you having to fight the weight of your hand, but you're also having to fight this very strong wrist flexor muscle, which is flexing your wrist down. So before we can work on activation, which is lift, 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 lift the hand, lift the hand. Before we can work on that, we have to work on inhibition. Relax, relax. Get these wrist flexors to relax. All right, now why did I go into that laundry list of all the things that can make spasticity worse? Is because I think your environment and your setup are absolutely critical. You want to pick a time of day when you're well rested, not overly anxious about anything. So you don't want to be doing it while you're fighting with a spouse or fighting with one of your kids. You want an environment that's relatively quiet. Even pay attention to like any background music that you have. You want to make sure it's probably like a more soothing type of meditation type of music. And yes, you can look this up on YouTube and just search like relaxation music if you wanted to find music that might help to inhibit. Make sure you are positioned in a way that isn't causing pain and that you're comfortable. For the arm, it's really just having the arm supported when you're working on the wrist and the hand, or you're trying to learn a specific leg movement. I always recommend starting laying down, trying to get your body in as relaxed of a position as possible, especially if you have a leg that always wants to shoot out. And then finally, it's what kind of cues are you telling yourself? So the least helpful cue that you could say is lift, 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 lift. If you're trying to move your wrist, move, 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 right? I call that a facilitation type of cue. Or if you're trying to raise your arm, lift, 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 or reach, 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 reach. Like those are all what I would call activation type of cues. Same with the leg. For those of you that are trying to bend your knee, it's bend, 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 bend. That is another activation cue. Want to try and stay away from those types of cues and lean more into relax. Okay, so if you're trying to lift the wrist, you can support it with your other hand and think relax. Let the hand fall. All right, if you have to help it with your other hand, stroking it helps a lot of times just to get that hand to relax and think relax. If every time you try and perform that movement, you feel your hand tighten up, then you want to pay even more attention to the relax component. If you're someone that, even when you do that, your hand is just so fisted up, I've talked about this a lot. I do recommend some kind of a splint just to keep your hand open and then just working on the wrist. A lot of times you will have an easier time relaxing the wrist if the fingers are open and the thumb is kept out to the side. All right, so that would be an ideal setup to start working on wrist. Now, when it comes to the shoulder, the best cue that works almost 100% of the time to help someone get a little bit more active movement is go half effort. So if you're trying to reach your arm up overhead and all you do is you get this right here, I want you to think half effort. Go half effort. If that still doesn't work, then you want to add some kind of a tool to assist. So whether that's your other arm or whether that's holding onto a dowel with two hands and reaching it overhead, you want some kind of a tool to set yourself up for success. Now that goes back to what I talked about what increases spasticity and that perceived load or that perceived challenge. You want to minimize that perceived challenge as much as possible. So sometimes if you give yourself a little bit of assist, either with a TheraBand, which I've shown a lot on this channel of how to use a TheraBand to help assist a movement, something to make that movement easier, to decrease that perceived burden that you have to do this major movement. Same goes for the leg. I've showed the TheraBand belt, which I really like to work on hip and knee flexion or lifting that leg. For a lot of you, that's a lot of times where that spasticity kicks in, is that knee just locks out straight and you cannot bend it to swing it through. That's where I love a belt with a TheraBand attached to it to assist that movement, decrease that mental burden or perceived burden that you might be feeling, hopefully decreasing the amount of the involuntary muscle contractions that you don't want and allowing you the ability to facilitate a normal movement pattern. So I hope all of that made sense for those of you that are dealing with spasticity. Don't give up. Don't give up on that arm. Stretch every day. That will also help to just make your movement retraining sessions a little bit easier and also decrease that spasticity a little bit. So don't give up on the arm movement. Keep doing your stretches. If you like this video and you want to see more videos like this and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. If you really want to take your rehab to the next level and really take full ownership of your recovery, I highly recommend you check out our Gold Monthly Membership program. With your Gold Monthly Membership, you will get access to an exercise vault of over 400 exercises that are specifically designed for anyone who's trying to recover from a neurologic injury. You'll also get access to our monthly lives where you can submit questions in advance and I answer those once a month, and access to our Discord channel where you can interact with me and other members throughout the week. To learn more about that, visit rehab-hq.com. That is also where you can go to sign up. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.